Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. I'm a little late. I'm actually a lot late. I normally start this at the top of the hour. Doesn't matter if you're watching replay, but if you replay, hi, thanks for being here. I normally watch this at the top of the hour, but I got caught up in. I have a little to-do list every morning. I write myself a new to-do. I have a. Okay, I'm going to stop. Hello. Welcome to Plant Consciousness Commentary. I'm Tigre Gardenia, your host. I'm like running. You could tell I'm just running. I'm running. It's Friday. It's near the end of the day for me. I'm in the middle of something super fun and exciting, and I keep getting all caught up in the things that I'm doing, and I'm loving it. I absolutely love when I am in this mode because I'm just really, really inspired right now by so many different aspects. I have a number of projects going on simultaneously, and for some that might seem kind of crazy, but for me, with my multi-passionate mind, it actually stimulates me even more. And so I have I'm working on a whole series. I'm working on, let's just slow down a little bit. Take a nice deep breath. So I'm working on a number of different projects all at the same time. And don't worry, I'm actually really well organized. And I do take a fair amount of rest in order to get there. But for example, one of the things that I'm working on is I have next Friday. So today is the 13th of June. And on the 20th of June is the Voices of Plants for a Better World conference, which I am ridiculously excited about. It is an all-day, well, for me, all-night conference with plant communicators. It's hosted by the Plant Initiative, and I am one of the plant communicators. So I have a presentation. And last night, I say last night because I started in the afternoon and then I got really caught up in it. And by the time I was done, it was like early evening, but it was perfect because that's kind of like my when I get excited and when things happen. And I literally finished all my slides. Now, I had worked on my presentation now for a while, and this is probably one of the most thought through kind of presentations, and I really wanted slides to go with it. I don't normally do slides, anybody who knows and has done my workshops, but I'm switching things over a lot. And I've decided that in addition to the activity, this particular one is more of a presentation, like kind of like a TED Talk. It's about 18 minutes long. And so you can't really do interactive things, which is what I really love. As you know, for those of you that join me in the Naturally Conscious community, you'll know that like my favorite thing is, of course, to do presentations, not presentations, but more like interactive workshops. This is a presentation. So I wanted to think through exactly what I wanted to, like the journey that I wanted to guide everybody on. So last night I finished my slides. Woohoo! And so presentation done, slides done. It's just a matter of running through it a few times this week. And I am very excited about that. So that's one thing I'm working on. The week after that, on the 28th of June, on a Saturday, is the first Reconnect with Plant Kin workshop. It's a new series that I just launched this month. It is a series that I plan to do one workshop every month, the last Saturday of the month. And this one is called Reawaken Lost Senses. This is a workshop that I started working on for the Dom and Her Alchemy School. And I realized it was just so good that I wanted to share it. And so I asked all of you via my newsletter. I gave you a whole series of different options for workshops. And this was number one by like a landslide. And I was so excited about that because it's a great workshop. It includes all the general things. And you know how I am. I love interactiveness of the whole workshop setting. So this gives me an opportunity to actually do that. And that's the best. So I have that project going on, plus all of the things that we always have happening in the Naturally Conscious community, which is so good. So good. On Wednesday, we had our budding artistry. And so every Wednesday is our Sprouts Writing and Creativity group. And this is a group that gets together and we do creative writing. no rules, mostly prompts, sometimes different types of activities like blackout poetry or collage or things of that nature. And once a month, we specifically focus on anything other than writing, or at least anything other than traditional prose writing. So we might do, haikus, but most of the time we do art and different art. And I got to run it this week because I luckily no longer run it every single week. And I say luckily because I love that the Leader Sprouts are doing this, because I'm learning so much being, again, a student or a participant in the group. And I absolutely adore kind of all the different creative things that we're doing. And this time we created art from each other, in the sense that we started with this really cool plant oath that we all took, that I had created for another workshop that I did live in Croatia. And it's the super cute plant oath and then from there we drew, and then the next rounds, because we went round robin, various rounds, each round 15 minutes, everybody drew incorporating something from somebody else's work. And the artwork is stunning. Like, if you go to the Naturally Conscious community, I even posted it. It's so beautiful that I posted it in Sprouts, in Sprout Discussions, which is the free area of the Naturally Conscious community, just to share with everybody what it was that we did, because it was so powerful. One, because it's a great exercise, and this is something that any of you can do if you're doing a team building and you're looking for, how do I incorporate, how do I bring the group together and give them a plant kind of ecosystem focus. So the fact that we started with this oath kind of focused us all in on this specific, what's the right word I'm looking for, on creating this alliance with plants. And then from there we drew. And then as each one of us incorporated everybody else's, you're not only bringing in the other human person, but you're also bringing in the alliance that they have decided to take as well with plants. So it's a really great way of building a team, or of getting people to really know each other. And that's one of the things that I absolutely adore about the Naturally Conscious community. In all these years now, we've had the opportunity to really get to know each other. There's a whole core of us that really get to know each other, and hopefully we'll get to know you too. And to work on these types of projects gives us the opportunity to not only each one of us develop our own relationship with plants and our own skills, but also our relationships with others. And I just, that's one of the highlights. Anyway, so it's been a good week altogether. I mean, we had a great discussion on Tuesday in the Plant Inspired Masterclass, talking about wildness as a core intelligence. And it's just been all around good. So events in NCC in general, which are always high on my focus list. Very cool podcast episodes this week, both me as a guest. I've had two in particular that I recorded this week that blew my mind. I mean, one guy simplified, I should say it like that, but one of the hosts simplified everything I was saying so beautifully, as a person who has absolutely no relationship with plants. And yet he was looking at me the entire time. He's like, oh my goodness, everything you're saying just not only makes sense, but if you do it this, this, and this. And I was like, exactly. And it was just fantastic. So of course, once those episodes are out, I will let you know. Plus, I recorded another episode for the podcast itself. And again, mind blown. There's just so much going on. So these are kind of my planty NCC based projects. I'm also already working on the workshop for next month because, I got to be ahead. And then at the same time, there's so much going on here in Damanhur. I mean, you got to imagine solstice is coming up, right? Next week is solstice, summer solstice for most of us that are in the Northern Hemisphere. I do have some Australians. And so we do have winter solstice happening. And, solstice is a powerful time. From the trees' perspective, I can already feel how the trees are starting to open up to the universe so that they can start to transmit messages. I talked about this a little bit on the stream last week when we were saying how there's this new paper that came out by the main author that we know is Monica Galliano, and about how plants transmit during the eclipse. And here in Damanhur, we instead have worked very closely with plants, with trees in particular, during the solstices. And because during the solstices, they're known to start to transmit believe what you want to believe. You know that if you're here, you're going to get science, you're going to get spirituality, and you're going to get the arts all mixed up. That's my caveat. I say it once, and then that's enough. But anyway, so our philosophy is that, and what we work with is the fact that trees open up during the solstices and start to transmit all of the information that's coming from the planet. Everything that the planet has experienced in every single form gets transmitted up. And that transmission then goes to all the planets across the synchronic lines, to all the planets that have life on them. And then they also receive everything that's coming. So there's kind of this global reset. I tell you what we did and you tell us what you did. And then all of us have the same information, which is really fantastic and amazing. And it's just another confirmation. And we don't cut any plants during the solstice period. For the 3 days right before and the 3 days after the solstice, more or less, we don't cut any kind of tree. We try really not to cut any kind of plant because of this transmission that's happening. And I highly recommend, if you have a chance, to do some listening exercises or some activities right after the solstice. Because and just ask, if you don't believe me, ask the tree what they received coming from this particular perspective, because it's very fascinating. And I have in one of my Damanhurian groups that I teach has one of my students is very much into the whole world of aliens and understanding forces and beings that live outside of our planet. And I keep telling him, I'm like, Sturla, all you have to do is right after the solstice, man, go sit with a tree for the next month and just grab a notebook and start writing. Like, I bet you're just going to get so much information that you can get. So solstice is coming in and there's already a shift in energy happening. There's a lot of people arriving here in the first city in Damanhur. So there's tons and tons of movement as people get ready for the solstices. Plus last week, going back to the last week for 1 second, because I told you multi-potentialite. So I'm just kind of sharing so that you understand how my mind really works. Last week, I also got to teach a lesson for the Damanhur Alchemy School, which is something that I'm just starting to get involved with. The Damanhur Alchemy School, like I said, is where I first taught this Reawaken Lost Senses course. Or workshop that I did. But one of the things that I do now for them routinely is when they have their first retreats in the first year of the Damanhur Alchemy School, they come here to choose their staff and the wand. So you get a staff and a wand, and because the staff and the wand are obviously plant, basically a tree of some sort gives part of their body, so sacrifices a part of their body for them. So they've asked me to do this lesson going forward, and I have to say, I've done it now 3 times over the last year and something. And the first time was a little difficult because I wasn't really sure what to get into. But this last one was really quite beautiful and quite powerful, because we do this entire point of connection with the trees in trying to just really get people who maybe don't have this type of connection to open up and to open their senses and to really enter into a different relationship, so that when they do go to find the tree that wants to give their body, it is an exchange that's happening. In other words, there's a very conscious understanding that the plant is making a sacrifice. I am sacrificing a part of myself because I believe that your development is so important, that your continued growth is so important. And it actually, in doing this, has really helped me think back to when I got my own, staff and my own wand. I have to admit that my staff, I have not used it as much as my wand, for example, which I did use quite a bit when I'm making potions or when I'm doing alchemical things. But my staff, I didn't. And now I'm like, ooh, I really want to get in there again to decorate, to spend time. I do remember at the very beginning, I spent a lot of time, taking away the bark and smoothing and starting to decorate to kind of honor that relationship. But now that it's been so many years, I remember I did this while I was doing my master's. So it was really an interesting perspective because I was in Florence doing my master's, and I would come up to do the alchemy school. And now as I think back on it, I'm like, wow, I should really go back in there and apply this from the perspective of the things that I have my own self learned, but also what I've been teaching, and I'm kind of excited about. So Damanhur Alchemy School, Reconnect with Plantkin workshop series, which happens on the last Saturday of every month. Next week, the Voices of Plants for a Better World. I keep calling it Better Tomorrow, but it's for a better world happens. And that's a free event. There's almost 1,000 people signed up already. So excited that this topic has 1,000. The last number I got was 911, and that was already a week and a half ago. So I'm sure that we're closer to 1,000 at this point. There's a bunch of information on my website. I mean, inside the Naturally Conscious community, as well as on Facebook. I also have on my Facebook page, you can find the event. So that's another thing that's happening. And then add to that, going back to Damanhur now, we have solstice, we have the Damanhur Fest. The Damanhur Fest, which happens on the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, is all about the missions. And so last year was the first year of the Damanhur Fest. I was not really involved, other than I worked security for it. My night side did security. I actually did overnight security, which is another story I'll tell you in another day. But one of the beautiful things, so for those of you that don't know, I used to have an event production company. So when I left Microsoft and I left the corporate world, the reason I left, or not the reason, but the impetus that finally got me out the door, was that at the time I was representing an artist, a musical and visual artist, super talented person, really good friend, who then became my business partner when I founded my company, Infinite Connections, which was a company that created large dance events. So festivals, multi-day festivals, as well as night events that were mainly dance and performing arts. So, and art in general. So it was mainly electronic music. It was intentional dance. It was very much, let me create a safe space for people to be able to have these experiences. So I have a lot of experience in the event world. One day, if you want, ask me questions and I'll tell you all about like those parties, because I used to do, like, one of my biggest parties was inside the Science Museum in Seattle, Washington, in the United States, when I lived there. And oh my goodness, what an event. And that's how I first started to co-own a circus, right? Anyways, and eventually went off on tour with Cirque du Soleil and all these types of things. So I had kind of stayed away from the fest the first year because I wanted to see what they were doing and I wanted to understand it. So this year they asked me to participate and to help, and I'm really excited. I'm just kind of getting my feet wet because I'm trying to understand the vision. But when we sat down and we started to talk about what we wanted the vision to be for this year, what came up immediately was missions. Now, if you go just right now to Damanhur's Facebook page or the Instagram, you will see that there are videos happening of our missions. One of the big missions of Damanhur which is to reconnect with what we call bridge species, right? They're species that have a divine spark and that we need to reconnect with as human to these species. And there's a whole series of ways that we do this. So we travel around the world as Damanhurians. There's groups that travel around the world and participate in events with these bridge species. So right now they're in Africa and they are working with, I believe, mainly elephants and gorillas is what I saw from the videos, because we actually don't know what's happening because it's a thing that happens kind of super secret. Anyway, so we decided that the fast this year was going to be very much focused on missions, and missions was an extremely important part of that on two sides. One side of it, we wanted people to understand like what it means to live your life based on your mission, your life purpose, your mission, to really feel it so core to yourself, and then act out and have a group of people of which you can act it. And then whether you're in love with our missions and you want to become a Damanhurian, or whether you want to go off and find others because you feel like your mission is different, no problem. But we want to unite all the people together there who really are looking to actively work on their missions. So, we have a great program that's all set up around missions and not just talk. This isn't talk, man. This is Dom and her. We do meditation with our hands. We do things. So it's going to be super interactive. It's going to be really exciting. Tickets are just on sale right now in Italian. When I get off this, I have to go and update the English website because tickets are finally ready, and then we can have the tickets on sale. And yeah, so if you're thinking about, if you've been wondering, how do you find people in order to carry out your mission, because missions shouldn't be done alone, they should be done with others, then the Dumb and Her Fest on the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th of August is the place to be, because that's the place to be. So, Fest, plus all the other stuff. And then I have tomorrow I have 2 more big meetings that are connected to different projects of Dom and Her. One with the international members, international initiates, which I represent and help liaison with the social side of Dom and Her. And another one is this super fun group that's just sort of forming, connected to people who are facilitators and change agents. So there's a lot going on. As you can tell, there's a lot going on. In all this, as I talked to you last week, I really am trying to get into an understanding of, what do I want to do with this space, right? This space was set up to always do plant consciousness commentary, to go into papers, to go into the science, to break it down, to analyze it, to understand it, and all things like that. And I definitely want to do that. I have such a long list of papers that I want to go through, but I've been told that it might be better to think of it in a slightly different format. And that was what we talked about last week. So if you have questions about what that should look like, please go listen to last week's live. It was relatively short because I had taken a long hiatus and I just wanted to come back. So I've been talking to people, I've been listening, I've been thinking, I've been exploring all these different topics. And for sure, one of the things I have to do is make myself, in that schedule that I just told you, time to read everything more carefully and maybe not consolidate, but put together kind of arguments. I hate using that word because it feels in English like we're talking about arguing when it's not. In every other language, it's easier to explain it, but basically to put together these topics so that, oh, beautiful. You are so weird. My video does this thing. Anyway, in order to bring together for you kind of an easier way of understanding all these papers. Now, let me say this about papers in general. There are, pardon my French, a fuck ton right now. Sorry for saying it that way, but which is fantastic. I mean, literally, I couldn't be more excited. It's kind of like I was saying to you earlier about the Voices of Tomorrow, for Voices of Plants for a Better World, that there's 1,000 people signed up. Like, who would have thought that an event around plant communication has 1,000 people signed up, but it does. And I think that is amazing. And what we're going to talk about today also, which was a big event that just happened, also had thousands of people sign up. So kudos to the fact that interspecies communication, and specifically plant communication, is making it into the mainstream. Like, yay to all of us and to all of you who are kind of like, keep pushing for this, which means that there's tons and tons and tons of papers. And not only that, the papers are becoming more, what's the word I want to look for? Nuanced. That's the word I want to look for. Where in the past, you would look for, okay, plant neurobiology papers, and yeah, sure, you had to break through the science, not the science, yeah, the sciencey part to try to get to the heart of what was happening. But you kind of knew you were talking about plant intelligence, or some of them were talking about plant consciousness, or some of them were talking about plant sentience. Now the papers are way more nuanced because they are talking about, it's super hot in here right now. They are talking about, they're talking about different aspects of the way plants communicate, and then tying that back to intelligence and then applying it in other ways, which is wonderful from the perspective of the fact that we're seeing more, like, some of the old arguments are already moot points and people just understand that plants do those things. So now we can look at it in a much more holistic way. In other words, yeah, sure, there's lots of mechanistic, like I'm just going to try to look at this little silo, but there's a lot more holistic papers coming out from the perspective of looking at everything in a wider breadth. What does that mean? That means that there's a lot more work for me, because if I'm going to come here and bring this information to you in a way and have a discussion and open it up, then it means like really going into a wider stream of papers. Plus, there's an entire world of critical plant studies and plant humanities that is just expanding because there's more and more people that are taking a lot of the work that we have already explored here from the last maybe even just 20 years and applying it into areas like performance, like artistic expression. They're applying it to feminism. I've had a lot of conversations recently about ecofeminism and about ecology in general from a relationships perspective. So it's great and a lot of work. Like, and it's like I watch other kinds of creators and that are out there that are doing in other areas, not in the plant world. And I love that they, how much time they have to dedicate to preparing the materials. I mean, I'm in the middle of watching something right now where people are online like 8 hours a day while they're exploring one specific topic. I was like, oh, I don't know if I could get there. I don't know if I could get there. So look, Paul gave a great tip. It would be good to give your insight into the schools of thought forming in these papers, how they're interconnected. That's a great way of looking at it. And I think that could be really cool because there are kind of camps that are starting to be created in all this, which is, I find interesting. There is the camp that is still very, very technical. Like I was just looking through, I said I was looking through my papers. I organized my desk finally that I hadn't organized in a while. So it was a bit of a mess and I don't work well with mess. I don't know about you, but this multi-potentialite does not do well in clutter. Clutter, no. I don't have to things don't have to be super, super clean, but they can't be cluttered. And in that, I found a piece of paper where I was writing down the names of all the scientists that I have followed or that I've listened to their papers, or sometimes most of them I've met. But for example, that's one school of thought is still highly technical, like Balushka and Novoplansky, which we've talked about if you go back to old plant consciousness commentary, I've broken down a lot of their papers. These are hard school, like, plant biologists and neuroscientists, but who are using that towards plant sentience and, more importantly, the whole plant neurobiology, electrophysiology world. And what does that all mean? That all basically means that these people are taking activities that plants are doing and trying to understand how does that I don't want to say mimic, but how could what we're seeing in these particular areas of plants could they be the plant's way of consciousness? In other words, they're trying to get to the heart of how does a plant physiologically show consciousness or experience consciousness. So there's one side of it that's looking at that, and that's really fascinating. There's another side of it that's asking wider philosophical questions about how does the intelligence of plants navigate the world, and what can we as humans understand from that navigation? Like that's a slightly different question, right? It is a yes, still with a biological base. So they're still looking at things like, and I think that Merlin Sheldrake, talking on the fungi side, does this really well, where he is so enamored with what fungi do not philosophically, biologically, and he's then able to, in a very, what's the right word? I don't want to say honest, but a very thoughtful way, expand that into life and the fascination that he experiences and what that actually means for him, as well as for the world in general, the interconnectedness of all of that. And I find that beautiful and fascinating and a really great way of doing it. So there is biology for biology's sake. There's kind of biology, but that leads to larger questions. And then there's this entire relational side, um, like what I hope I'm going to get to, which is Emanuele Coccia. Don't ask me how to pronounce this correctly. We will listen to it and see. Who gave a beautiful talk during the keynote. His keynote for Thinking with Plants and Fungi was fascinating and very abstract in some ways, but super poignant in others, about how ecology is basically just natural relationships, or natural sociology, you might say. Basically, ecology is just the sociology of natural beings, of which we are one, hence why we are part of ecology. But like, he looks at ecology all through the world of relationships, and relationship through the world of design. How is it that we design for relationships, and how can we better create and sustain and support relationships by thinking about it from the natural world? So that's another school of thought that kind of takes kind of it's more of what I studied when I was studying biomimicry for social innovation, or my own master's, which was social innovation, plant social innovation and design. And it really moved me towards the idea of, how do I design back to my natural roots? How do I think of the fact that I am a being of nature, and therefore all of these things that I'm learning about how the natural world behaves, it is me too, and how my conditioned thinking is what prevents, what creates anxiety and creates separation where it wouldn't be, in all these pieces. So there's the entire design side of it that also comes out of it. Jessica writes, I love my plants so much, makes me weep sometimes. They feel like family members. I so understand. I lost a family member last week. A friend of mine months ago gave me two small orchids to take care of. Very, very, very small, because she wasn't able to take care of them in her home. She was struggling, and she had already lost, I think, two of them, and handed these two over, of which I put both of them in the same place. And it's interesting because one stayed very, very small and eventually, unfortunately, passed. And the other one instead is now in started off in a teeny tiny pot like that, and is now like in a decent, good sized pot. And not only is, still a very young orchid with very small features, but flowered. So it's really interesting, because when I have two plants like that side by side, it helps me first of all not blame myself, because these two plants were taken care of in the same way, right? Like, I didn't favor one of them over the other. The other one was in a big pot because the other one grew, and one stayed in a small pot. I even changed the pot twice for the smaller one, hoping that that would help he find, something, footing of different. But he just didn't want to make it. And at the very end, I tried so hard to connect, to try to get an understanding. And I just couldn't. I couldn't. So I totally understand, Jessica, how you feel. Like, I haven't even brought myself to be able to compost Key. Key is still sitting in the bathroom next to the other pot, which some people might think I'm insane, like going in there and going, why do you have a dead plant in here? But it's like, the dying process is so slow, and I wanted to give Key every space to be able to, do what they do. And I didn't want, so yeah. And it was only probably in this week, this was a process that started about a month ago. It's probably only this week that Key completely died, like that the entire plant is now dead. And yes, I understand the weepy part. So you started your studies in a mycelium lab. Congratulations. That must be so fascinating. You probably have fantastic stories. I hope one day you will come to one of our iSprouts community gatherings. We have our interspecies sprouts community gathering in the naturally conscious community. We have one coming up next Wednesday. And I hope you will come and join us and tell us of your stories. I'd love to hear also if you did an internship at a biological park. That must be both fascinating as well as scary as hell, because I find that when you're in the general world of plant studies or of biological studies, man, sometimes it can be beautiful and you can have really cool conversations with people. I think the fungi people tend to be more connected and more like experimental, but traditional plant people and biology people tend to be like not 10. That is a gross misunderstanding. Let me say it in a wider way, can be a little rigid about the way that they do things and what they think is right and wrong and how plants should behave. So I am super curious as to what kinds of experiences that you are having, to see, just curious. I'm curious as to if things are changing. I guess maybe that's the right question. Because even when I did my master's, it was really interesting to see the people that had beautiful, amazing, open fascination and experimentation happening, and the ones instead that were just still a little bit tied to the human world. Let's just say it in that way. So it was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge, but it was great in so many other aspects. Stefano Mancuso, who has written, everything from Brilliant Green to Plant Nation to a whole series of plant things, was a very interesting professor to have. And I'll just leave it at that. I also did see that this Saturday, why does that happen? I don't know. Stop it. Stop doing this. Sorry, I'm yelling at. So this Saturday, unfortunately, I have an event right during it, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to go live. There is an interspecies conversation with Paco Calvo, and those of you that are in the Plant Wisdom Book Club or inside the NCC know about Paco, because Paco is amazing. If you don't know who Paco Calvo is, go check out Planta Sapiens. His book is really good. Because he approaches things, he's a philosopher of biology, a philosopher in the biological studies. In other words, he is a philosopher, but he operates in the realm of biology. And in the world of plant neurobiology, he is one of the founders, alongside Stefano Mancuso and Balushka and Elizabeth van Valkenburg, who is another wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. I so loved meeting her last year. And Paco, he's Spanish, he's from the University of Murcia, is he's an experimental philosopher in biology. So, yeah, sorry, my eye went over to the chat and I saw Jessica's comment. It was kind of difficult. Researchers test extremes. Exactly. It's fucking hard. That's my point. Like chop, 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 like plants, we can do whatever the hell we want with them. Oh, it's so, so hard. So, we'll send you lots and lots of love and like lots of energy, and to hopefully figure out a different paradigm to help us better understand what is the direction we want to take with all of this research and science. Anyways, going back to Paco. Paco's great. He has a new theory. Over the last few years, he's developed a theory, which is, for him, plants are in a state of kind of shut-in syndrome. If you think about, I don't know, I think it was Patch Adams, the whole laugh doctor who worked a lot in this perspective of children who are human children, in this case, who are shut in. In other words, they're completely functional. They just happen to not be able to move anything external, right? So you can't move and you can't signal in some way that inside you're completely awake and aware and such. And for him, that has become the best model for what plants are experiencing. He believes that plants are trying to signal to us in the best that they can, but because of our plant bindness, we treat them as a form of shut-in the sense that for him, even just getting to the place of looking at plants as a shut-in would be a step forward, because it means that we acknowledge that plants inside are completely aware of what's happening, but their way of interacting out with the world is in a way that we as human beings can't necessarily understand. So it acts like a shut-in in the sense that I can't see their movement, which is probably what's happening to humans. So I love this because it's another example of working with plants to help us rethink the way we work with humans and the way we think of humans. If you think about the fact that a person who we look at as a shut-in is most likely using other forms of communication, other channels, other senses to explore and to connect into us, which is very possible, then wow, wouldn't that change the way we think of it? Because now it's not a matter of helping the child be able to regain the things that we know, whether we're talking about the fact that, yeah, sure, we can use blinking and people can, some of the shut-ins are able to communicate because there's like a little board that has letters and you use blinks and stuff to know where it is that they're going. But what if instead we could open other forms of communication by opening other forms of senses? And I think that this is in some ways where Paco is trying to get to. So he has a talk called Interspecies Conversations with Paco Calvo. It is on Saturday. It's Do Plants Talk Back is the topic, it's the topic, excuse me, let me say this correctly. The topic is Do Plants Talk Back? Only if we learn to listen. And this is at, it's an interspecies, is literally the organization is called like Interspecies Lectures of some sort. Unfortunately, the links that I have here aren't working right in front of me, but you could probably look it up as by going to Interspecies Conversations Paco Calvo, and you can find it for this Saturday. I'm looking forward to, I've registered, so at least I'll get the recording. Then again, I have so many recordings to catch up with that it's going to take a while to get there. But that's one of the many things that I wanted to do. So speaking of recordings, I am going to attempt to do something that I don't know and I've never tried to do here. And I hope it's going to work. So here's my plan for today. Remember, I said I'm redoing everything here. I need to rethink how I bring papers to you, because I've been told that kind of where I'm fascinated by just reading them and exploring them, I've been told maybe the reading of them from beginning to end is not necessary. Maybe we can think of a different way. So I'm still working on that. And in the meantime, one of the things I want to try to do is instead comment on some of these many conversations that are happening around the world. Like there have been some very amazing what's the right words? Presentations, conferences, discussions, all recorded. Giovanni Alawi just recently did one. There's this Paco Calvo one that I just showed you. And so I thought, I don't know if this is going to work, so I need your help. If you're listening, I need you to tell me if this is working correctly. First of all, can you see my screen, which I just shared? This is, so the Harvard Divinity School. Okay, great for that. But listen now, Paul, don't go away. I'm going to press play. Oops, not there. I'm going to press play here, which is the right place. Can you hear it? Do you hear what he's saying? Because that's the question I have. No, you don't hear it. So how do I make you hear it? Hold on. Let's see if it gives me because in Zoom, I know how to do this. And this was my fear. Oh, I see it. I see it. I see it. Click here to share audio, share a tab or screen instead. Okay. So entire screen here. Okay. And then audio. All right. Let's do test 2. Okay.
Outfit.
Can you hear?
Especially his shoes. That will surely awaken your consciousness.
Yay!
And bring it to.
This makes me happy. Okay, sorry, we're learning together. Fantastic. Okay, so this is all right. Let me stop sharing it for 1 second, and then I will share it. And since we know it works, yay! Okay, super excited. All right, here's the thing. So a few weeks back, there was a fantastic conference called Thinking with Plants and Fungi. And it was held by the Harvard Divinity School. And it was a conference, exactly what the title says. It was a very broad look at the relationship between plants and fungi and humans, and how do we think like kin and such. There were a number of keynotes that were given. Unfortunately, I missed the final day, so I'm praying that they are going to publish the final day. They have not yet published all of them. I've only seen a few that have come up of the recordings. There is one by Giovanni Aloui, which I hope to go through. I was going to do that one first, but because I love Giovanni, I got to meet him a few weeks back when he was in Milano. And not only do I love his work, after talking to him, I love this person's mind. I love this man's mind just so much, so much. Very much appreciate the way he's thinking. And you're going to hear me talking a lot more about him, especially about how plant agency in art, which is his specialization. And you heard me talk a lot about him relating to plants and AI. So this person, not the person you saw when I did the test, which is the director of the School of Divinity, of the Harvard School of Divinity, who is a cool person, but not exactly the most interesting of what we're talking about. Who is really interesting in this is the person that they're going to share. So it's Emanuele Coccia. He's going to introduce him beautifully, so I don't need to introduce him. But what we're going to do is we're going to watch this talk together. So I'm going to probably talk a little bit over him. I'll probably pause him a few times in order to have this conversation because it's just going to be so good. It's just so good. Okay. So now that we know this works, if at any point there are any problems with what we're seeing, please let me know. This is the first time I try to do this type of work here in this setting. I've done it with StreamYard. And I've done it with Zoom, but I've never tried to do it inside of the YouTube studio. And to be honest, I still haven't decided which one. I'd actually kind of like to go back to StreamYard, but right now I am just not ready to shell out the money to organize everything, to make everything happen for lots of different reasons. So somebody did put me on to Evmux, which is another one that might be interesting, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, let's just listen to this.
To another level.
All right. If I didn't
don't believe me,
problems,
it's something of a.
You can hear me talk as well
as
as him talk at the same time.
There they are. Look at these shoes, friends. Emanuele Coccia.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul.
Has just elevated your consciousness.
All right. So listen up.
It's a travesty that this podium will obscure them from view. Perhaps we can get a webcam, Robbie, on Emanuele's shoes next time. I promise. Okay. It is, to borrow a word from Ralph Waldo Emerson again, it is a delight to introduce, I can't yet call him my friend. He's someone I'm hoping to make my friend.
I would want to make him my friend too. I'll have to, as soon as...
Professor Emanuele Coccia, who is a philosopher, yes.
I was like,
who is a philosopher and lecturer at l'École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales.
Once you see him,
he is the author of 4 books, Sensible Life, The Micro-Ontology of the Image,
we need to
The Life of Plants,
I want to hear how
Metaphysics of Mixture, Metamorphoses, and Philosophy of the Home, Domestic Space and Happiness. You can tell from these titles that his interests are indeed wide-ranging, from plants to fashion, from distant stars to domestic spaces.
Thank you, Paul.
He's also involved in a number of artistic collaborations across different media, film, photography, and fashion, among others. And across all his many interests and collaborations, he brings his truly unique philosophical voice, a voice I first heard speaking through The Life of Plants, a book I cannot recommend highly enough. His provocative reflections on breath, immersion and mixture, air and water, the fish as the paradigm of life, plants and stars, all of these have been my constant companion for several years, and I suspect they will be for several years to come. Emanuele, I want to thank you for all that you've done to spark my imagination.
So they're annoying me.
I think there are many here who feel the same. It's truly an honor to have you with us. So this afternoon, Emanuele will constellate some of his many interests in our second keynote lecture entitled How to Make Cities with Plants. Please join me in welcoming him.
Now, if you know me, you now understand why I'm mentioning this again, because the whole idea of the built environment is a big topic for me. So, And Emanuele
So
has
I'm
one of the most
honored.
unique
Thank you
ways
so
of
much,
looking at
Charles,
it.
for this presentation, so generous and kind. I'm honored and happy to be
Hold on a
back
second,
at
I wanna
Harvard.
see.
I'm extremely attached to this place. I used to.
I don't know why this is playing it through. I don't know how to do this. Let me see if it gives it to me. It's playing it through. I can't choose. I don't know where to choose. It's playing my audio through the wrong speakers. Let me see if I have this. Hold on one second. System. How do I change the audio connected to this? For whatever reason, it's playing it through my speakers rather than playing it through my headphones. And I don't know if that's annoying. I'm going to let him talk while I try to figure this out as to, oh, that is not something I want you to necessarily have to look at. Oh, there we go. Let's see if this works. Okay, I'm going to try again. Hey, this is working correctly. Better. By the way, I just want to say this. Oh, you're not hearing it anymore? Michelle, can you hear it? No. Okay, hold on. Let's see if this works. Hold on. Annoying. Okay, I'm going to it could be because I changed that. Let's try one more time. We will go back a little. Oh, no, not that much. Okay, let's see. Can you hear him now?
So I'm honored. Thank you so much, Charles, for this presentation, so generous and kind. I'm honored and happy to be back at Harvard. I'm extremely attached to this place. I used to.
Does
I
the
had the
audio work
privilege
now?
to teach here for a semester some years ago, and
Okay.
it was
Fantastic.
actually
Thank
one
you.
of by far the most wonderful teaching experience in my life. But I was above all very proud to be enrolled in order to fight on the front lines for Harvard's one and only mission in this planet, to prove to the world that nerds are cool. Very, very cool.
I just want it on the record that one day I want to be this cool fashion-wise. Like, he's got sunglasses, he's got the, headphones, he's got the like sweater over him, and he's talking about nerds being cool. I mean, seriously, he has made it happen.
Could be actually, you could change the sentence on the emblem and say that preclari sunt studiosi, and change. So nerds and cool in Latin.
Thank you, Jessica.
So, and it's beautiful to be present here in this historical day when we are celebrating a momentous and pivotal roundtable for peace negotiation between two cultural identities who have often fought among themselves for the title of the nerdiest group on the planet. So the plant nerds and fungi nerds. And of course, since we are also scientists, we could tell if the agreement will work only if there will be in the future mixed marriages and mixed race children. So let's hope that
Mixed races of nerds.
Now back
I
to
like
the
it.
topic.
I definitely need that.
And sorry again for these distorted slides. It were much more beautiful. So on January 12, 2024, a team coordinated by Stéphane Rostand and Philippe Descola published an article in Science titled 2000 Years of Garden Urbanism in the Upper Amazon. The article reported the discovery, thanks to LiDAR technologies, light detection and ranging, I'm quoting, the largest urban network of erected and excavated features known in Amazonia, whose beginnings date back to 2,500 years ago in the Upana Valley in Amazonian Ecuador. These were archaeological findings that allowed for much more radical hypotheses than those advanced by other archaeologists and anthropologists such as Michael Hickenberger, Carlos Faustus, or Eduardo Neves, based on other monumental sites in the Amazon, which, quoting again, are all more recent, considerably less dense in terms of features, and not embedded in such a vast and dense communication network, end of quote. The testimonies, this witness of the Opano Valley, materialize another scale of landscape anthropization, where urbanism covers hundreds of square kilometers. There were not only buildings with complex geometries, but an extremely intricate network of roads and connection between what seemed to be actually, or used to be apparently, autonomous villages. So the paradox they formulated, this discoveries formulated, is quite simple yet overwhelming. The Amazon forest, which we consider the most natural and wild space we know, the cradle of planetary biodiversity, is one of the most radical and enduring expression of urban culture.
Okay, I just want to stop there for a second, because already this is a point that we don't think about at all, right? The problem that we currently have in our society around the idea of the destruction, let's use that word for right now, of humans, like the destruction on nature of humans, is not because we humans are inherently bad, but it's because the original trauma of our disconnection to nature makes it impossible for us to build with nature. So in societies and in groupings of humans that still feel those connections, then that co-creation leads to what he's talking about. So what he's basically saying is that the problem is not humans building things. The problem is humans building things from a state of disconnection means we create things that are disconnected. When we create from a state of connection, we create things that are connection. And these Amazonian studies basically prove that. And hurrah that we're getting somebody who's like showing it to us in such a different way. Because I think if we keep just, saying that humans are bad, period, with a period at the end of it, which is what we talk about ourselves all the time, of course, we're never going to fix the fucking problem, which the problem is. And the problem that we need to fix is the fact that we're disconnected. So,
Note well, the idea here is not that it's not the idea of an ecological succession. It's not that the forest is a post-apocalyptic reconfiguration in which trees have invaded the space of a vanished human civilization. No, the forest is the ultra-historical form of the city, a city that has transcended the boundaries of the culture and species that created it, becoming intrinsically transcultural. So this idea should not be a surprise. 385 different ethnic groups have lived in the forest for at least 20,000 years. They live in a not nomadic manner, but of course we in the sense Europeans have problem to recognize that. But the resistance to thinking about the identity between cities and forest seems atavistic. The very word forest, with which we continue to designate a stable and lasting, and for some people even here, also socialist association in space of time of different tree species, literally, so this word literally expresses the idea of foreignness to the urban. The term, as you know, comes from the Latin word foris, which means outside. So the forest is the space outside of the city, which would condense within itself everything that is not urban, not human, and therefore has no history and does not participate in any form of artificiality. Yet, for at least a century, anthropology has repeated that things are not really so. Starting from a famous book by Gordon Child, it has been incontrovertibly established that the urban revolution is the consequence of the invention of agriculture. For millennia, the human species lived in groups of hunter-gatherers. We gathered what we found and hunted other animals. We stayed in one place for a few days or weeks, then migrated elsewhere like birds or wolves. Then something happened.
Yep.
Suddenly. Probably the
Suddenly.
first human groups did not even notice, but something happened. Someone must have fallen in love with some plants. And it's
We can understand
precisely
that.
this crazy and
We totally
inexplicable
understand that.
love for plants and the sense of obligations towards them, the desire to remain faithful to a relatively small number of trees and shrubs that suggested to those groups to build cities. So it's a love for beings farthest from us that forced us to exchange our mass.
So I just want it on the record that in Damanhur, the spiritual founder of Damanhur used to always say that the falling in love is actually a bad thing. Let me explain it for a second because it connects very much to what he's saying. Being in love is not bad. The falling in love period produces such a series of different chemical reactions, emotions, whatever words you want to use that happen, that kind of juggle our mind. And therefore, in the falling in love period, you do things that make no sense. And that is where you get jealous and where possession and where like you forget all your friends and just focus on this person and stuff like that. And of course, it happens with stuff that you do, whether you're talking about projects or anything. He used to say the most dangerous time is the falling in love period, because that is where all of the problems that we normally associated with love are actually connected to. Once you are in love, once you love someone or some things, then all the beautiful side of love starts pouring out. But the falling in love period, not so beautiful. And I think that that's what he's talking about right now. I think if you think about it, humans started to fall in love with plants. And in falling in love, you no longer see the plant for who the plant is. You see the plant for who you want the plant to be and for what you want and the possession you want of that plant. And that leads to all the crap that he's about to talk about. But I just really, it didn't click in my mind until he said it, where he said it in like, humans started to fall in love with a select number of plants, which I find also fascinating because it's not.
Precious good.
Oops, sorry. It's not falling in love with plants in general. It's only a select number of plants that human beings fell in love with. And that period of falling in love then rewired the way we thought about them, and we forgot about everybody else, which is what happens when you're falling in love, right? If you're falling in love with one person, even if you're somebody who's like polyamorous, in the falling in love period, you only focus on one person. It is not until much later, until the love matures, that you start to express and see other things. And I think that that's what happens. We just never got out of it.
In space, the possibility to explore the world with a care of those beings who do not speak, do not move, and constantly grow and change shapes. In this ethnographic evidence, there are at least two counterintuitive ideas. The first is that it is the garden that invented the city and not vice versa. It's by learning to cultivate different plants, that is by establishing lasting relationship over time with plants, that the human species invented what is its greatest and most enduring artifact or work of art, the city. The garden is not the temporary interruption of urban fabric, it's its spatial and temporal origin.
Now, think about that in perspective to the Garden of Eden. The garden is the original creation. And the urban landscape is what connects the gardens, not the garden connecting the urban landscape, which makes sense if you think about all kinds of original garden spaces, like, or of those kind of civilizations. I went down several years ago to Matera. Matera is one of the oldest. It is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It is original. It's in the kind of almost in the south. It's in the south of Italy, not all the way down to the ocean, but like a little bit farther up in Basilicata. Beautiful area where it's connected. It's a troglodyte culture. So the culture is, you still have the caves that people used to live in. And when you look at how it was built and you look at cave culture, you realize that those caves were created in order to be like not in the garden landscape, like not in the agriculture landscape, but to be close to the agriculture landscape. It's an entirely different way of thinking about the Garden of Eden, where we think of the Garden of Eden as this controlled thing. And this has now come up in a few different, he emphasizes this in a really beautiful way. But I also came across this in my mystical studies when we were talking about the original Hebrew translation of the Bereshit, or, like the original books of the creation of the world. And the mystical and Hebrew text talk about the idea that the Garden of Eden was everything. That was the garden. And it is the urban landscape that comes in and starts to separate out the garden, not vice versa. So when we think about the Garden of Eden, we even think about Adam and Eve and all that whole kind of mythological study. Imagine that the garden that they're talking about is everything. They were not expunged from the garden from the perspective of there was this little space and then they got thrown out of. It was the dimensional plane, the entire planetary understanding was the Garden of Eden, the whole thing. And what they ended up doing, what ended up happening to Adam and Eve in being expunged, is that the right word? From the garden, thrown out from the garden, is that their reference points, their dimensional reference point got separated out. They were disconnected from their true nature. And so therefore they could no longer see the garden, even though the garden was physically everywhere around them. Mind blown. Mind blown.
The Big Bang, from which millennia ago, Boston and Dakar, Beijing and Rome, Sydney and Tokyo were born. They are all kids of some original garden. So the city is a consequence of a garden.
The city is a consequence of the garden.
With garden that politics started.
And it was with the
The
garden.
second idea is that in reality, the invention of the city is a very strange form of love for the life of species that belong to a different kingdom, to the kingdom of, for a kingdom different from our kingdom. The city is a crazy and inhuman declaration of love and fidelity to plant life. One could say that the city is a form of Bovarism, in the sense that Flaubert, so the author of Madame Bovary at first, and then Charles de Gaultier, later gave to this term in the sense of the pathology of people believing to be someone else that they actually are. So the fact we are actually vegetal Bovarists. With every time that we are building cities, we believe to be plants, whereby we are animals. So
I just want you to sit and think for a second. Hold on. I need to go back to that because this was one of those concepts that I was like, huh? Say that again. Let's see if I go back a few minutes and see where it is.
The garden. And it's with garden that politics started. The second idea is that in reality, the invention of the city is a very strange form of love for the life of species that belong to a different kingdom, to the kingdom of, for a kingdom different from our kingdom. The city is a crazy and inhuman declaration of love and fidelity to plant life. One could say that the city is a form of Bovary.
The city is a crazy and inhuman declaration of love for plant life. I mean, there's just concepts in this whole talk. I don't know if they put I need to go look afterwards if they put a physical transcript of it, because I feel like I have to read some of it in order to get the concepts. I don't know if you're following along, but to me, when I listen to this stuff, this is the second, almost third time that I've heard it. And the first time I heard it, I was like, I just sat there with my mouth open as he was saying certain things. I was like, oh my,
in the sense that Flaubert, so the author of Madame Bovary, first, and then Charles de Gautier, later gave to this term in the sense of the pathology of people believing to be someone else that they actually are. So the fact we are actually vegetal bovarists. With every time that we are building cities, we believe to be plants, whereby we are animals. So
we believe to be plants, whereas we are animals. So when we build a city, we believe to be plants. What do you think he means by that? I was trying to understand that phrase.
we are in this Emma Bovary form of life toward plants. And that's why we love cities. Biologists have long noted that we owe many things to trees. It's because of the need to cling to the branches of the tree canopies in which we used to live, that the primate that gave us birth, as in the sense of humanity, he learned to oppose the thumb. It's because of the same canopies, because of the fact that the same canopies were our first habitat, that we have the eyes so close the one to another, because we need to see like the visual depth, and we don't have eyes like here on the opposite side like birds. So our anatomy has been sculpted by trees.
Okay. So if you, I know I keep interrupting. I'm going to keep interrupting just so you know, because that's the whole reason why we're here, right? To have this conversation, because I love this. It's beautiful. And this has been happening to me a lot lately, where over the last few months, there's a lot of synchronicities that are happening, where confirmations across very different people of concepts that we talk about in the naturally conscious community so much. And this is one of them. The fact that we talk often about lately, like I said, not next Saturday, Saturday the 28th, I'm hosting the first Reconnect with Plantkin workshop, which is called Reawaken Lost Senses. And I talk about the fact that the senses that we have forgotten how to use, but that we come from plants. Therefore, if plants have an extra 15 senses, that means that we have to have all these other senses. And this is what he's talking about. We are shaped by the plants because of two different things. One, we evolved from the plants. And yes, Jessica, that's it. That's what we want, right? We want that like synchronicity that's happening in our thoughts. But one, we evolved from the plants. Therefore, there's aspects of the plants that we experience and have. And then on the other side of it, we have to remember that we grew up co-evolving with plants. Therefore, of course, if plants were here before us and we evolve with them in play, with kin there, it is a constant co-evolution in order to ensure that we are as attuned as possible to the vegetal world. We are attuned to the plant kin home. We cannot not be attuned because we wouldn't survive. So animals in general, all animals are attuned to plants because plants came first. And so therefore, it is the plants that have been shaping the way that we grow. They help ensure that our features are enhancements to what plants do. And if I take this a step further, so in Damanhurian philosophy, we talk about the fact that divinities are actually constructed by human beings. Divinities are extensions of human beings that can do things that we as human beings can't. And we as human beings still, to a certain extent, control is probably not the right word, but we guide divinities because we give divinities through our intention and through our energy. We give them the elements necessary for them to expand beyond us, which one could argue that this is a conversation we could have about AI, but I'm not going to go there right now. And we do this so that that is the evolution, and they can accomplish things that we in this physical world, because evolution is slow, cannot get to. Wouldn't it be possible that plants are doing the exact same thing? Right? The plants have shaped the animals and the humans to do the things, those non-sessile things, those movement-based things, those instinctual-based things that the plants can't do in rapid fire. And therefore, of course, they are like, evolutionary grandparents who have given a series of characteristics and skills and have encouraged us, like good parents should, go off, develop them on your own, but know that they are extensions of things that are necessary. It's kind of like the idea that, my mother often says to me, and I say, why is it that I don't have the same fears my mother did? She's like, because I don't want you to. I want you to be better than I am. Like every parent, I think, wants their child to be. I want you to be better than I am. And therefore, we have these extra abilities, but that come because our evolutionary grandparents, which in this case are the plants, pushed us across to a whole different level.
They are artworks in a way, but the city is a cultural gift and not an anatomical one that plants have offered us. After all, the human being is the only and sole animal species that has woven such a deep cultural relationship with the plant kingdom. We do not limit ourselves to eating and using plants, to building objects with our bodies, to dressing with our corpses. We are also the only form of animal life that has culturally vegetalized itself.
Another beautiful phrase. There's so many good phrases. Culturally, hold on, I have to write this one down. I didn't write it. Culturally vegetalized ourselves. We have culturally vegetalized. What do you think he means by that? Because I have my thoughts, which, of course, I'm going to yell at you. Vegetalized ourselves. I love this.
Like in a grim fairy tale, we have somehow married plants, and we've got children from them, the cities. So even if you want to divorce with them, you will have to deal with the mother or father till the end of your life, as any divorced parent knows. So if talking about plants is a part of theology, as Charles and Rachel suggested this morning, then it's more sacramental theology. We need family counseling more than systematic theology.
I love this. We need family counseling. I would agree. Mom and dad, the marriage between plants and humans are in trouble. And therefore, we need cultural marriage counseling because our cities are a mess because those are the children of our plant-human parents, and we're screwing them up. All of us are screwing them up. The plants are also screwing them up. Don't think that they're not part of this. They're complicit.
And if, as Marilyn recalled, the opposition between conflict and some biases is naive, it's because deep down, every marriage is a strange combination of both, so conflict and collaboration. So, now, like all love stories, even the one between human beings and plants is full of tensions, quarrels, pettiness, tragedies. And every love story worthy of itself knows the contempt and the disapproval of relatives, friends, strangers, priests of any religion, or mere and casual relationship. Even in anthropology, this phyto-anthropological love story has encountered strong resistance and great moralistic criticism. Its mass extreme form.
This guy will now obviously think of you as the bear clan.
It's really ugly to look at.
The bear clan.
It's not my fault.
Oh yeah, just so you know, throughout this entire presentation, he's obsessed because apparently his slides, when they were rendered out to PDFs, because it sounds like everybody had to make a PDF of their slides in order to do this. And of course, nobody thinks about the fact that if you lose some of the things that you can create in like whatever it was that he created this in. And so he talks about it the entire time because he's a designer. So of course, the fact that it looks ugly for him is like unbearable. But I want the name of all these books. There's not enough hours in the day.
In its mass extreme form, this injunction,
it's totally
according
like,
to which this marriage
the fact that he
must not,
the ugliness of it, the ugliest of it,
was expressed by the American anthropologist Paul Shepard, who shamelessly recognized agriculture as the ecological disease par excellence, the cause of all the evils that the human species has inflicted on itself and to the world. James Scott,
I want to hear that again. Hold on.
This marriage must not take place was expressed by the American anthropologist Paul Shepard, who shamelessly recognized agriculture as the ecological disease par excellence, the cause of all the evils that the human species has
Agriculture
inflicted on itself and to the
as the
world.
ecological
James
disease
Scott,
par
who took
excellence.
up this idea, writes that the adoption of agricultural life condemned humanity to the loss of the richness of the experience of the world and freedom.
Yes,
Once Homo sapiens took the
we were
fateful step
happier
into
as
agriculture,
hunter-gatherers.
he writes disconsolately, our species entered on an austere monastery whose taskmaster consists mostly of the demanding genetic clockwork of few plants.
Just think about this imagery for a second, okay? Here we are, wandering around the world, free, following cycles and connection and our own tastes, hundreds and hundreds of species to eat from all over the place, depending on where we are. We move from continent to continent, changing our diets and our physiology around it. And then agriculture happens, and we become slaves to the plant beings. Now, in turn, we punish our slave masters to a certain extent. But in reality, what has happened is that the wild plants have gone on and continue to do their wild thing all over the place. But that small number of agricultural plants have become our slave masters. Wheat, like all these limited species that we still eat, who demand our constant attention. I mean, and if farmers who will tell you that farming is hard work, where hunter-gatherers from the latest anthropological research used to take months off. They would hunt because they knew that that was the time, and then let's just take some time off and enjoy it. Fascinating, right? To think of it as the tables turned. I think it goes to like what Michael Pollan wrote about, the idea that we are actually being domesticated by the plants, but it's a limited number of plants that we're totally
It's a very
domesticated by.
pessimistic idea of agriculture. So these conclusions are based on two assumptions. The first is that hunters, that is human beings who deal only with animals, are actually more naturally human than farmers adapting to plant life. That the fact that adapting to plant life is a form of constraint against nature. The second idea is that
and this is what we've said all along, right? When we talk about our inner plantness, we say inner plantness is about stillness and awareness, but it is also about that sessile nature, where our animalness is our instinctual, our movement, our action-based nature. And we need both, right? We need both. But if we focus on agriculture, which is only that one side, right? We become that sessile, sedimentary nature, and hence why our cities are built out of disconnection, because we're not embracing the totality of what we are as human beings. Can you tell that I'm excited about this talk and why this talk blew my mind?
Biological kingdoms are morally impermeable. Animals must live as animals, plants must live as plants. There is and must not be communication between them. It's an argument that we've heard even this morning. And it's not a scientific argument, it's purely moralistic argument. So as you know, people want to stay pure. I would like to try to reverse the famous invitation that Marc Laugier, the famous theoretician of architecture, formulated in the 18th century when he wrote that il faut regarder la ville comme une forêt. So you have to look at the city as a forest. I would like to invite you instead to look at the forest as a city. I would like to try to draw all the consequences of the clear evidence that our cities are the illegitimate son or daughters of this forbidden love between human beings and plants. They are bastard, hybrids, and ambiguous figures, which, like all mestizos, have the virtues of both parents.
Yes.
So the
I can agree
first
with this.
important consequence is that the relationship to plants, you can call it agricultural, horticultural, gardening, phytophilia, or whatever, however you want,
Oh, I
is
wouldn't call
not
it
a
pedophilia.
tangential urban fact. It's the original urban fact, the premise and the form of all cities. Urbanism is originally a vegetal reality. It coincides with a
Urbanism
process of
is a
mutual
vegetal
domestication in
reality.
which human beings and some plant species choose each other and become their reciprocal home. The domestication comes from the word domus, which means home. So to create a city is necessary. Uh, it's necessary to become friend and home to plants and vice versa, allowing them to domesticate us. From this point of view, the opposition between city and countryside is illusory. The countryside is not opposite of the city, but a reduced and rarefied and a little bit neurotic form of the urban phenomenon. The countryside is a technique of interspecific or interkingdom association in
It's an
which
ecotone.
everything is subject to control.
It's an ecotone. No, if it's subject to control, then it's not an ecotone. Hold on.
I
I gotta
mean,
listen to
in
it.
the countryside, you control how many plants, which
Oh,
species,
okay, I
which
get it. I get it. What he's saying.
pace those plants are obliged to grow, and when they have to disappear. So it's like it's not more natural or more like, I don't know. It's just a city. In a way, it's like the opposition between a huge metropolis like New York and a suburb in the middle of nowhere in Italy, where everybody's
That's where
controlling
I am.
everybody, who is having sex with everybody. So
That's
from this
that's
point
where
of
I
view,
am. I don't know who everybody's having
the
sex with, by the way,
opposition
but it definitely is, and
is
everybody knows
just a
everybody
question of
type of thing.
intensity and not the question of distinction of nature. And from this point of view, the Amazon forest is much closer to the contemporary megalopolis, to congestion and excessive density that make any control strictly impossible than to this interspecies polis that we have called countryside. And for this reason, the solution to climate change is not to replace cities with the countryside, but to design cities more radically, to
Yes,
extend the culture of urban congestion to a
yes.
culture of congestion of species density and biodiversity. Like the Amazon forest, future cities must become a sort of magnet for members of the plant kingdom that allows them to domesticate us. So what the urban complex of the Upano Valley and more generally the history of the Amazonian ethnic groups reminds us is
So I love that he said this because I talk about this all the time, although I'm not as vocal about it now as I was when I used to work on these types of projects. When we talk about urban renewal, oftentimes we think that what we need to do is move more people out of the city. And that's completely wrong. We don't need to move more people out of the city. We need to completely radicalize the way that we grow, that we think about the city. The city, going back to his definition, right, where we talk about the idea of the fact that cities are the children of the marriage of plants and humans. If you use that definition for a second, let's put that as our starting point for a second and rethink about the city. The city, therefore, needs to be built for both sides to fully flourish. In other words, we need to use the characteristics and understand the characteristics of both sides of ourselves, the marriage that we have of humans and plants or animals and plants. Let's not just say humans, but let's just say animals and plants. And we need to build that into the city. Today, our cities are not built that way. Like he said, our cities are built on a sessile nature that is not the core essence of who we are. Yes, it is our inner plantness is that sessile part. And we do need to get back in touch with it to better understand a whole series of different parts of ourselves. But we also need to think about the fact that as animals, we are constantly in motion. We are constantly seasonal and have an entirely different way of putting it. And what happens when you marry our cities in this way, where we have a city that very much connects into both of these pieces of ourselves? It's hard for us to imagine it using the cities right now that we have as a base. So many of our metaphors do not include this, but we need to rethink it. And Stephen Kellard in his book Birthright is very, very good at doing this. I really enjoy the way that Stephen Kellard sort of rethinks the city from this perspective. I think it's very much aligned. It's not called out here by Emanuele, but I think it would be an excellent book for him to rethink of. And I'd love to hear his commentary on that book.
It's also that marriage is the love that manages to withstand the test
Public
of
Mars
time.
food trees. I love that, Jessica.
Outside of the metaphor, what I want to say is that to think about the equation between forest and city, which is a cultural fact and not a natural one,
Yep.
it's necessary to introduce a temporal factor. On the one hand, the urban complexes of the Opano Valley demonstrates that the life of a city must never be reduced to the expression of a single human culture.
Yes.
No, it's like the Amazon is a city, but it's a city that passed through different human cultures, passed
Yes.
through different species. That's a very interesting idea in a way. It's an evidence. It's not even just an idea. So it's precisely because a city is always born as an association between the human species and plants that it will be forced to express over time and space something more than a simplistic ethnic and cultural heritage. In some way, it reminds us that the nature of the megalopolis is always transcultural and trans-ethnic because it's always trans-specific. So in a way, to take seriously this identity of the Amazon forest and the city obliges us to rethink cities as something which overcomes, the administrative idea of cities. And today it's important to diffuse the link between the city ethnic culture and cultural identity, because for strategic reasons, even the left has started to think about ethnic and cultural identities in substantial rather than positional terms. And we often hear that even from anthropologists, a series of qualitative and ontological definitions of human cultures, but yet as Levi-Strauss and Stuart Hall has taught, cultures are always arenas of struggle, fight, transformation, and mixing. They are not a set of beliefs, but they are processes of transformation and metamorphosis of ideas that always come from elsewhere.
So the concept that I find that's really fascinating about the way he's talking about culture right now is that we tend to think of culture as static. But in reality, based on the way he is explaining it, culture is always in movement. Culture is always, I wouldn't use the word struggle so much as in motion or in evolution or in becoming, right? Elements of culture can get sigilized into the mainstream thinking, but it's still subject to movement and to the norms of that particular moment in time, and will most likely pass through. Hence why culture is always evolving. It's always growing. And I think that that's kind of the big conversation point all around, is that we as humans have tried to snapshot things and focus them on a certain moment in time, as if that moment in time is always static, but it's not. Everything that we do, from the way that we evolve to our cultural norms to everything, are always in motion and in movement. And if we thought about them, because that is our most likely human, that's our humanness or our animalness, let's just say the base of our animalness is that motion. It's that motion. Well, and Jessica, you bring up a good point, which is like you say, I'm going to say something crazy, but invasive plants might be a good idea. Actually, it's funny that you say that, because there is an entire conversation about the difference between invasive versus native, because invasive in particular is a plant that has no natural relations in the environment in which it's in, and therefore that they take over and they end up creating, to a certain extent, like a monoculture. So invasive, probably not the bestest thing. But the question of whether or not non-native species that then get naturalized and that becomes a new aspect of them, most likely wherever it is that you're living, something that you call a native tree today was still introduced at some point. The question is, how long ago was introduced? If we still remember who introduced it when, then most likely we're going to call it non-native. But if we have forgotten when it was introduced, then that means we're going to call it native, because all plants have moved around the planet. I mean, ginkgo bilobas are known for being able to have traveled all around the world to a certain perspective. So I'd say that, and there's a lot of really great conversations about this. I follow a few people who talk about this subject. Is there is a very narrow line between invasive and non-native. Those are two different discussions that oftentimes get confounded. But non-native, like we see in many different countries of the world, are also what create the culture, because culture is being made of movement that happened and eventually ended up in a place and settled in it, created some kind of cultural norms, and now others keep coming in, and that culture continues to evolve through that, which is pretty much what he's saying right now from the plant perspective, that we have, to a certain extent, we've in all of this, what ends up happening is that we have forgotten. We rely on our animalness for some things and we forget about it in others. And we're not doing a really good job of blending these two together and of knowing when to rely and being more conscious of which way we lean on it.
They are gardens, and like gardens, they are a set of strangers and migrants. Cities are the perfect incarnation of this technique of mixing and mutual invasion of different cultures, and the Amazonian example
and this is what I was
expresses
just
it
saying.
perfectly.
And the Amazonian example.
This is why, rather than continuing to
Jessica
use spatial metaphors, we should start using horticultural metaphors and in order to talk about cities. And we have to talk about cities in terms of grafting. This is what Ginny Gang recently proposed in a very beautiful book. I think everybody knows Ginny Gang. She's teaching here at GST, and she's an amazing Chicago-based
that's the only way these
architect.
people must be able to read all these books. They have to speak.
Her works, there is something you probably know, which is like the extension of the Natural History Museum in New York. She's the one who did the part behind the entrance. And so, and the idea in this book, in Ginny's book, is that the city is always
into each other.
A graft. So the practice of grafting is something extremely common. You couldn't drink wine, as you know, if there weren't
couldn't have any apples if there was no
but extremely distinct from a biological point of view. First of all, grafting is the proof that life can circulate in genetically and taxonomically different bodies. Life is capable of nourishing two bodies that are completely different in species, form, genealogy, and
there
origin.
There are so many concepts in this that are just blowing my mind.
Take your body and put them in, I don't know, on the legs of a good football player. So this would be amazing. So
I don't know. I think I would be on the legs of a giraffe.
For the ones who love football,
cool to see what it'd be like to be super tall.
And grafting demonstrates that this problem of life is not space, but the continuity of the circulation between stranger bodies. Grafting is also interesting because, in a way, you are imagine like grafting in vineyards, you are producing something where the future of a plant has nothing to do with its past. So it produces a total different discontinuity between past and present. So the future is not the expression of a history, of a past.
Which is exactly what happens evolutionarily speaking.
But why is
grafting is
interesting?
That, of course, it bypasses
the taste of wine
everything up. The question, though,
is taste of life
would have this been the natural expression of
That's
that
why
plant?
cities
Or
have to be taught in terms of grafting, because we have to
directions that
improve the taste of our cities
by someone else. I think grafting made a lot of sense. Maybe still makes a lot of sense, plural, I mean, not plural past, but also when there is a deep relationship between human and plants, between animal, plants, whatever, then that grafting can be done as a form of speeding up evolution, because it is almost as if the plants themselves are saying, graft us together, right? Help us. And there is a relationship that's happening and a mutual conversation that's happening in order to move us in these directions. The biggest problem is this disconnection that we keep talking about, right? The fact that we as humans are disconnected means that all these processes that could lead to really beautiful evolutionary steps that could get us to the directions and the goals that we want to move to are lost because they're now become a force of will rather than a mutually beneficial relationship where the plant kind of whispers to the human, hey, you know, that plant over there, we kind of want to get close together, and it's going to take us maybe about 200 years for us to do it in much more like I drop a seed and then they drop a seed and then like I pollinate and we go. But if you graft us together, we're going to do this in like maybe 10 years. Can you help us? Or even the human suggesting, hey, have you ever thought about, merging with this one over here? But listening for the response. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about Paco Calvo's talk, where he's like, do plants talk if we're ready to listen? And I think we need to create that listening so that we can once again become part of the ecosystem and we help each other out. Just the same as an animal might carry along seeds on their fur, then this is the equivalent that we as humans do because we have capabilities that are different from what those plants are. But it has to be done in relationship.
Life explodes and improves when lives are not necessarily compatible, when lives that are not necessarily identical are mixed, producing bizarre, somewhat unnatural hybrids. The third interesting element of the idea of grafting is that it allows to go beyond the idea of repair. Grafting means pruning. It means being aware that sometimes the best way to prolong life is not to restore something that is broken or in difficulty to its original form, but to introduce something new, unexpected, and contextually heterogeneous. Grafting is the very form of modernity, and the seed is a practice of multi-specific grafting that has forever changed the balance of life on this planet. So we have grafted our life in the life of the plants.
By the
and
way,
this
if
has
you're here, please make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you.
Doesn't mean, however, that our relationship with plants is natural. On the contrary, what I'm trying to demonstrate to you is that every time that you try to embrace a tree with serious intention, meaning you want to marry it, the developer in you comes out and start to build in your neighborhood. So you become an engineer. The relationship with plants has made us more artificial, more complex, even more fragile in a way.
But again, my question, which I don't think he addresses, but I do think would be a great follow-up talk to this or follow-up discussion based on this, hence why we're here doing this, is that the case only because today we're suffering from disconnection? And if we weren't suffering from the disconnection to our natural selves, would we instead, build in a very different way, in a way that was not the traditional city in the way that we think about it? I mean, I think that there's a lot to be had here, a lot to be discussed about the idea of how much is all of this because we're disconnected and therefore the plants we're almost not hearing the messages correctly. Or is this just inherently the way that it is supposed to be? And maybe even in connection would be different. I don't know. These are really good questions to explore.
In short, it has transformed us into real cyborgs. It seems like a provocation, but it's not. As is well known, the word cyborg first appeared in an article written by Manfred Clynes and Adam Klein about the transformation required for a living being to live in space. It was the time of space travel, and Clynes imagined what does it mean to go to live in a space where you have a hugely hostile environment. The core idea is
Aren't we currently living in a space that has
it makes no sense to change the environment.
We're already there.
You have to change your own body. It's like you are changing, in a way, your own metabolism in order to live in a environment which is not, or which is too difficult to change. Space travels, the authors write, challenges
I thought it
mankind
was
not
space.
only
I just think it was
technologically,
cold
but
for
also
that.
spiritually. In that, it invites human beings to take an active part in their own biological evolution. End of quote. The idea expressed is that in the case of relocation to an entirely new environment, rather than merely modifying the environment, it's easier to partially modify the physiological and homeostatic balance of the living being itself by anticipating or avoiding genetic transformation. The authors imagined the
Or
example
anticipating
of a
or
fish wishing to live on
avoiding.
land. I'm quoting, if however a particularly intelligent and resourceful fish could be found who had studied a good deal of biochemistry and physiology, was a master engineer and cyberneticist, and had excellent lab facilities available to him, this fish could conceivably have the ability to design an instrument which would allow him to live on land and breathe air quite readily. End of quote. The human being traveling in space should do something similar to this fish. I'm quoting again, if man attempts partial adaptation to space conditions, instead of insisting to carry his whole environment along with him, a number of new possibilities appear. One is then led to think about the incorporation of integral exogenous devices to bring about the
Hence
biological
the idea
change
of a
which might be
biosphere on
necessary
Mars
in
is
man's
not going to work
homeostatic mechanism
because we
to
need
allow
to
him to
adapt
live in
to
space
Mars.
qua natura, end of quote. And Klein proposed the term cyborg, which is like the combination of cybernetic organism in order to define this exogenously extended organization and complex functioning as an integrated homeostatic system unconsciously. So in reality, by injecting the plant form of life into our blood, it has made us cyborgs, and it has effectively allowed us to live anywhere in this planet, because it's because of cities that we can live in any form of environment. So that's the idea. We married plants. We decided to be fixed on land. We adopted the same relationship that plants have to space, and this has transformed our physiology. And
So if I'm hearing right, what I'm hearing from him is that we as humans went too far. I'm going to use an example that he sort of touched on in the beginning when he was talking about love. We fell so in love with plants that we denatured ourselves to be more sessile, in the sense of more rooted in place, by building cities, and then over time lost our identity, which led to disconnection. And now we are this sort of mindless human, mindless to a certain extent, who is missing both our connection to our own nature and have warped the interpretation of the sessile nature of plants. Did I get that right? Is that what I'm understanding from him? Because that's what I'm hearing. I think, kind of.
because of that, we became able to live even in Boston, where it's incredibly cold during the winter and incredibly hot
It is
during the
incredibly
summer.
cold. I
So
don't know about the
nobody
incredibly
would
hot
have
part, but it is
chosen
incredibly
this
cold.
place, actually. So a real marriage can only last if the person who has changed helps the other person change too.
This I
What
agree
we call anthropocene.
A real marriage can only last if the person that changed also helps the other person change. So, it's funny because for the longest time I've been trying to figure out since I started working with plants, like what is it that caused this disconnection? Like even when we talk about Damanhur from the three mother worlds that were disconnected. And so why is it that the world, the animal human world is disconnected from the plant world, is disconnected from the world of the nature spirits and any other worlds that there might be? These three primary worlds, why are they separated? But this is a really interesting theory. that says that the separation, because I kept saying to myself, like, why would I voluntarily separate from something that treats me so well? And this is a completely different thing, which is something that we do see in human relationships in general. So we kind of can visualize it a little better, is I fall in love with something, but I then start to fall in love with my interpretation of that. So in this case, I fell in love with another person, plant, and I fall in love with that plant in that moment. And I adapt myself in order to be in this relationship with this plant person. But then the plant person continues to evolve. And I don't, because I hold on to the idea of the plant person in that moment. And the plant person is going along on their evolution, and I'm stuck in an old, but I've now disconnected enough from my own self that I don't know who the hell I am anymore. We see this all the time in human relationships, right? I get into a relationship with somebody, the person that I'm with continues to like grow and change, and I'm in love with the person that I fell in love with in the moment. So I adapt myself to who that person was when I was 20, 25, 30, whatever age that they were. Now the person is 40, 50, and they're in a completely different space, but I'm still in love and have adapted to the person where they are. And since it wasn't a conscious adaptation, it was an unconscious adaptation. I don't know that how to get out of that. But I also no longer know who I am, because in that time, 10, 15 years have passed and I myself have not evolved, neither. So I'm stuck in this disconnected state. This makes sense to me as a theory as to why and how humans in particular disconnected from nature while still proclaiming to love nature. Shit. Sorry. That makes some sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you, but it definitely makes sense to me. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Tell me in the chat, because I really want to hear. And of course, please hit subscribe and like, please. Like, we need that.
Is a kind of like that. Our love for plants has changed us. And at this point, it's hard to say if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Exactly. It's hard
But
to say.
we don't have any other choice now, but to help plants love us for who we are, to get to where they have taken, to get them to where they have taken us. It's not easy to figure out how to do that, and in
because
which
we're not
manner.
evolving together.
I could end by leaving you with this enormous question, perhaps quoting a few lines from a Shakira song about change, we cannot love anymore, and so on. But we are at Harvard, and what's more, in the faculty where they teach us to divinity, so something more serious is needed. So Paulo Mayora Canamus, Virgil, beautifully said. Perhaps to understand the way forward, it may be useful to return to an episode from the recent Venice Biennial, Architectural Biennial, which opened a few days ago. The Belgian pavilion was assigned this year to landscape architect Bas Metz, who is also teaching. Partner is Stefano Mancuso, who Bas and Stefano introduced a series of tropical building. They then connected them to artificial intelligence that allows them to decide independently and autonomously on the regulation of all climatic factors according to their needs.
Okay, I just want it on the record. On the record, you're not going to believe me, but I swear this is witnesses. I have witnesses. When I first started working with the music of the plants, I had a friend here in Damanhur who's a bit of an engineer guy, and I asked him if we could design exactly this. We had a long conversations. I even have sketches of a whole series of different projects that are basically this. He was putting in a greenhouse in the nucleo that he lived in, and I wanted there to be a specific tree in particular in the middle of the greenhouse that was the master controller to be able to open the windows, to be able to turn the water on and off. Now, we were convinced that the water, they would be a little greedy with the water and couldn't do it. But I am so excited that somebody actually went ahead and did it, because we designed so much of it, but we ran into problems because you have to have an enormous amount of electrical, physiological, and electrophysiology, physiological as well as other kinds of probably organic compounds, in other words, to be able to understand what the signals of plants are trying to say. And when is a plant signal trying to say water me versus feed me versus aerate me versus all these types of things, and what other signals might be coming through there. But I'm excited that somebody actually created, and of course it had to be Mancuso based, because I think we talked about this when I was doing my master's. I'm pretty convinced that we talked about it in our classes at some point. But anyways, I'm excited that it exists.
So they decide whether it should rain or not, how much light they have. They will the first to show that plants are intelligent, much more intelligent than humans. Monica has also taught us that they
Yeah, Jessica, it's interesting. I've seen things like Mancuso also did a study. He didn't do a study. He basically was given a bunch of money to do a study and ended up putting a bunch of plants on carts. And what he just, because how he ended up with a bunch of money to do that. But the funny part is he found that they were swarming. Like, in other words, the plants would swarm together to get towards the light, which is very similar to what you're saying about how the slime mold with robot legs moves in the direction. Also here in Dominher have built a cart twice before. There's actually a modern version of it, and there's the older original experiment that we have. And it's very interesting to see where plants choose to go to. And that goes to that whole, like, what is intentionality and where is it that they're trying to go to? And I think that now technology is catching up. And it goes to what I had said much earlier, where I was saying how I feel like, plants have, evolutionarily speaking, used us just the same as we use divinities to do things that they can't do, that can't move around in some way. And we have become the mindless drones that have forgotten our own true nature to be able to co-create with them instead of just follow their lead. And so I wonder now, as technology continues to evolve, whether or not they themselves are going to be able to do these types of things, whether can now create the types of movement that is necessary for other kinds of evolutionary change. It'll be really fascinating.
We have to pre feelings and we have to attune ourselves with their feelings. Is at stake in this very strange experiment?
Again,
what is the point
he doesn't care
of
about
connecting plants to
feelings.
artificial
That's
intelligence?
my own experience.
Aren't they already intelligent enough? In reality, what happened in this space is that for the first time, the most advanced I've created has been made usable and available for plants.
Yes.
It is as if we opened the black box, provided the access codes and passwords, and made our source code transparent. Of course, this is still a very speculative approach, but there are two important ideas here. The first is that to resolve the disparity created by this excessive identification, or to put it.
Okay, but see, here we go back to the whole conversation of connection. We stay in disconnection. We are right. We're not going to be able, we're not going to be able to leave the city or really co-create something that's innovative and new. But if we find connection to our true essence, for real, the plant and the human, or the plant and the animal, not just I fall in love with you and therefore I follow you around like a puppy dog, because I am an animal, so I can say that, but instead truly marry and become consciously in love with you, which is a very different state, can then we co-create and co-evolve together consciously. That would change, especially with the technology we have today.
It outside the metaphor, it's not by aspiring to a natural relationship with plants that we will be able to recover Earth. We have changed ourselves and cannot go back in what we were. The idea is that rather than freeing ourselves from technology, we must make it accessible to other species.
Exactly.
It's, after all, a matter of inviting our non-human partners to play with our favorite toy.
Yep.
Only then can plants return to live.
Now we have the disparate. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. There is just so much there. Oh my goodness. There's so much there. There's so much there. This is so Yes. These are the conversations I want to be having. This is it. This is what I absolutely loved this keynote. That's why I wanted to share. Ones I heard were like this, but Emmanuel really pushed us to rethink things. And what I loved about this conference and giving space to people like him to speak, and to all the speakers really that I heard are, well, most of them, yes, not of them. What I loved was really that out of the box thinking, and that to a certain extent, non-fear of being able to state things that really push our understanding, because the idea of children, of cities being the children of the marriage of plants and humans, or plants and animals, but really plants and humans in particular, and how he said that we are in desperate need of marriage counseling because in this marriage, we as human beings have lost our identity. We've lost ourselves. We've lost our connection to our core essence. We have fallen in love with plants in a way that triggers control issues and jealousies, rather than falling in love with them in that way, reaching that core essential, like mature love. And I wonder if now, after whatever it is, 2000 plus years of agriculture, which is really the falling in love period, whether we will reach a new level of maturity. Yeah, this is it. These are the conversations I want to have. And I need to find a way. There's tons of these talks, by the way. And Rachel Peterson, who's the person who kind of put together this entire Thinking with Plants and Fungi conference, also just recently spoke for the Plant Initiative, which we will probably do in a future session. So I think this is the direction we're going to take. I want to look for the papers and the studies that match these conversations so that we can go over them, as well as have these types of conversations. And this is really what I think is going to elevate where we're doing. Plus, the beauty of it is that here we can share it coming from these sources, and then bringing it into the naturally conscious community is the opportunity for us to have really interesting discussions and to play with this. Like, I totally can see the next time that I'm up as the Sprout leader for the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. I want to work on a series of prompts that are all around these concepts of, the marriage of plants and humans, and the children, and the, vegetal, ecological disease that we're experiencing called agriculture, and all of these different concepts. I think this is going to be a really great topic of exploration also for next month. So I'm thinking, like I said, this Saturday, the 28th, we're going to be doing Reawaken Lost Senses as the workshop. And the following one will most likely be an enhanced plant communication conversation. And I think that this is going to be a great piece of our discussion in order to enter into an enhanced plant communication that is not about me listening to plants in order to learn, because you plant guru, omnipotent, godlike creature, but instead bringing ourselves to the same level and having these discussions as two mature adults with a deep, long-lasting love for one another, that we as plant and human need to go. It's going to be marriage counseling. I think we need to talk about this in the form of marriage counseling. And I think we need to really think about our enhanced plant communication, because similar to when I, as a human being, go to, marriage counseling and say, we're talking at one another as two humans. I think as plants, in a lot of cases, we are doing the exact same thing. We're talking at one another. And I feel like we really need to think about this in a completely different light. So I'm excited. I want to hear your thoughts on this. So please, leave a comment, come into the Naturally Conscious community, and let's have these discussions in our Plant Inspired Masterclass discussions that we have on the second Tuesday of every month. Like I said, I have the workshop coming up at the of Reawaken Lost Senses on the 28th. There's just so many different things. Come on in there. All the information you need is in the show notes so that we can start getting into these conversations, because this is the direction that we need to go if we're really going to co-create or co-evolve consciously with our plant friends and allies. We need to stop thinking about them in guru terms, because that is what's created a lot of this disconnection between ourselves. And we need to look at ourselves as equal parties in this beautiful planet of ourselves who are need to co-create a new reality together. And that involves co-creating our own personal lives as well as the cities in which we live. And I think that what Emanuele talked about is perfect, gives us a lot of food for thought for us to bring into future discussions. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of the discussion. I'm really excited to continue. This gave me exactly what I needed to kind of rethink and to recharge plant consciousness, commentary every week. Next week, we will not be having plant consciousness commentary, just as a reminder, because I am speaking, as I said, at the Voices of Plants for a Better World conference. But I think this is perfectly on topic, so that we should go and listen to that. And then we will be back the week after, so that we can, continue on this. And there's a lot more videos and conferences and discussions for us to weigh in on, plus all the different papers. So that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to your comments. Please remember to like, subscribe, hit, that like button, because that is what helps the algorithm show this to more people. Invite your friends to come and listen to these conversations, because you're out there somewhere, and we need you. We need you to be able to open up the opportunities for us to bring these conversations to more people, and to be able to open to new ways of thinking about our relationship with plants if we're going to co-create a new society together. So come to the Naturally Conscious community, hit like and subscribe here, listen to the Reconnect with Plant Wisdom podcast, and that's it. That's it for me. Happy Friday to everybody. Remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. Tigria Gardenia, I'm out. Bye.